The Government of Canada collects, processes, and stores citizens' data using legacy IT infrastructures running in silos, trapping information, creating barriers, and slowing operations. But the government knows this needs to change. A transition to digital government is underway to improve digital service delivery while simplifying IT maintenance and improving security and compatibility. The cloud-first strategy paves the way for digital transformation, and ThinkOn is here to help at every turn. As the only certified Canadian cloud service provider, we are not subject to data and privacy laws of foreign countries like other providers. With ThinkOn, Canada's data stays in-country with full data sovereignty in one or multiple dedicated Canadian public sector data centers. ThinkOn Cloud is underpinned by the same VM hypervisor technology that hosts more than 90% of government workloads, simplifying the path to cloud with virtually no change to user experience. Using VMware HCX and ThinkOn's migration appliance, users can migrate large datasets and virtual machines to the cloud at astonishing speeds. Scale and power even the most complex infrastructures with flexible cloud solutions, purpose-built for the public sector. Best of all, our transparently priced catalog always ensures predictable bills with no egress or hidden variable charges. Sign up for a free trial of ThinkOn Public Cloud today.
Welcome, viewers. It's Wayne Gudbranson here, CEO of Branham Group. I'm delighted to be moderating a very important agenda today on digital government. And I have with me two esteemed gentlemen running very powerful organizations knowing all about the federal government. That's Craig McLellan, founder and CEO of ThinkOn, and Peter Neer, National Director with VMware Canada. We're looking forward to getting into some very topical requirements here and questions going forward. Feel free to share comments as we talk. Questions should be addressed in the Q&A or chat. And we're looking forward to addressing those at the end of the discussion. Just by way of just an administrative point, just above your own picture, clicking the three dots in the top right-hand corner of the card, and selecting the hide non-video participants is very helpful in terms of improving the overall delivery. If you could do that, that would be great. Gentlemen, I'm going to start the first set of questions, but I'm just by the way of a prefatory remark. We've gone through some very interesting times in the last year and a half with COVID. And it's also represented a great opportunity to accelerate digital government. And so, as you know, the Canadian government recognizes the need for cloud first and adopt a cloud first strategy to empower workers to work remotely, to optimize their operations on par with the private sector and so on. In fact, one of such example of this was the delivery and of the CERB program in itself, by the way. What's your understanding of the status of cloud first by the Canadian government? Where are we now and where are we going? Peter.
Thanks, Wayne. Yeah, it has been an interesting year, to say the least. I think looking at it through the lens of technology, that we as technologists have really been challenged to step up to what the citizens of Canada need, and have done so admirably. I have been incredibly proud to be a Canadian in seeing how we collectively and we as a government have responded to the needs of Canadians. So you mentioned CERB as one example. One of the more topical or timely examples that I personally have experience with is vaccination programs right now, and the expectation that when the scientists make a change in policy of who can get this, how is it safe, and then you match that with the availability, that the technology needs to be able to respond within hours to that sort of change, right? So CERB showed us we can stand up something net new within a few days. And now we're showing ourselves that we can make changes to those things within hours as well. And so I don't think directly answer your question, Wayne, but I have seen the mindset shift towards innovation and agility and get things done now, just make a quantum leap in the last year. Craig?
Yeah, I would add to that. I think I've seen a remarkable focus on being practical as well, like to your point about having to roll out something quickly. So we've maybe moved from the art of the possible and all sorts of interesting conversations about things that could be done to what can we do now and how can we do it as effectively as possible, which I love that because frankly, it's all about getting stuff done. And I think that's great to see that shift. And as you know, a lot of public sector and people have been working from home. I think the other thing is I've also seen an improvement or an increase, I would say, in activity level and engagement because I realize people are working more, whether you like it or not, that's what's happening. But I think people are being a lot more effective too, which is a great thing as a supplier. It's nice to always know that you're working with people that are also, their same goal is to be as effective as ourselves. So that's great.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for that. One of the things that we've identified within Branham from an analyst point of view is that this is not the first time we've been talking about cloud first in Canada and compared to other countries around the world. But what's really cool in the last year and a half, it's been accelerated dramatically. And this is going to be very exciting. Economies of scale for citizens and workers going on. As the government realizes the cloud opportunity, going digital also presents risks associated with collection, processing, and storage of data. Simply put, digital sovereignty is a national concern. Cloud security, compliance are all there in terms of top of mind on the government's agenda. What do you think the recipe is to approach the seamless transformation that addresses integrity, confidentiality, availability, and control of data? What is your recipe, guys? Peter?
Yeah, I think that's more than just a tech conversation as well. I think that trust is at the heart of all of that, right? So we as technologists, we have things that we know we can do to enhance trust amongst Canadians. And just as an example, I'm going to keep going back to examples in the last year because they're top of mind for me. So last year, when we as a country rolled out the COVID Safe app, I found myself personally on social media amongst my friend groups and my neighborhood groups and all those sorts of things, trying to share my professional opinion on the privacy and the safety and security of that app. And Canadians really weren't willing to take it up unless you could prove to them that this is safe. You are not going to be sharing my private data with anyone. And it was an uphill battle. I got to say, just as a Canadian who's passionate about tech and passionate about Canada, I had to say, look, I've looked at the code. It's good. You're not getting tracked in here. This is a good app. You should trust this app, move with it. But that also taught me that Canadians are inherently distrustful of some of the data and how governments might be treating it. And so I keep coming back to that word, trust. We need to have policies that are transparent about how data is going to be used. We need to have capabilities technically to prove to our leaders that we're following those policies. And we need to have technology choices that allow us to understand what type of data is it, how is this data being used, and how are we as technologists able to hold our heads high and say, yes, the data of Canadians is safe, it is private. And that's high level. Craig, I know you've been working on this problem in just a significant way in the last year. So I'm curious to see the next layer down from you.
Yeah, trust is such an important word. We deliver services in a multitude of countries now. Canada is our home base. And what I love about Canada and trust is that the two words are synonymous. And so I was on the phone this morning with a number of clients from the Middle East, and that came up. Canada is synonymous with trust because they have their own compliance requirements. And I think that kind of takes me back to the second part of the conversation is about supply chain. because I think that if one thing we learned in the last year was the importance of supply chain. Now, it might have been more to do with physical equipment and things like masks, but it now has evolved to include a lot of services. And I think that for the first time, people are starting to think about the real implication of supply chain around where do people actually live and where do they work and what do they actually do? And are they actually doing the work in the same country they're living in? I mean, there's a whole series of issues coming up around taxation that certainly are bigger issues than I can deal with. But I think it's important for everyone to know that more than ever, it's important that people that are actually operating infrastructure are residing in the country that they're delivering the infrastructure for, especially when we're talking about sovereignty and traceability and supply chain management. But at the end of the day, it is about trust. And when we first started getting clearance a few years ago and putting our people through it, I was clearly fascinated by the degree at which the Canadian government looked at individuals to make sure that they were trustworthy. And it certainly has made me a lot more comfortable knowing that we employ people that are trustworthy because all of our people have gone through that clearance process. It all links back together as far as I'm concerned.
Gentlemen, just in terms of leadership, by the way, what is leadership going to play in a role in digitization process? How does leadership play a role in this?
Why don't I take that one on first, Peter? We've been involved with a lot of conversations about migration projects because, of course, everyone wants to move as quickly as possible. And one of the things that I've noticed, especially as it relates to leadership, is it's imperative that the first project that someone takes on when it comes to migration is successful, because you can't build confidence over time as easily when you have failures. So, I admire the organizations that start with something that's small and manageable that can then be turned into a success story to build confidence and trust in what people are doing. And so that's a leadership issue, because it's so easy to say to the cloud or cloud first, trivial to write it down, much, much, much more difficult to actually execute in a way that is, the expectations are, I want success, but more importantly, I want to be able to use that to build confidence. And to me, that starts with leadership. And Peter, I'd like to hear your opinion too.
Yeah, and I think there is, first of all, I agree with everything you said. Be successful, trumpet that success, and make sure you can go from there. I think leadership has a part to play in setting expectations on why you might want to do this in the first place. So cloud first is an easy buzzword, but often, especially at the implementation level, people can get confused as to why are we doing this in the first place. And I think an early version of why had to do with cost. And frankly, I encourage people not to think of that. And if at a leadership level, you're talking about cloud for reasons of cost, you're going to set the wrong tone in the organization. The reason that you would want to go into cloud is innovation and agility. And I don't care if you're government or if you're private sector, you want to be in a place where if someone who is a leader in your department or someone in an elected official in government says, hey, I want to do this, we need to do this for the good of Canadians, the answer needs to be yes. And you need to have an organizational confidence that says, yes, we can do this. I know I can get the resources that I need. I know I can get the technology I need. And it's not going to be, start with a 2-year procurement process. It's going to be, we have things set up now where I can give my people the tools to say yes. And tomorrow they can be building this new capability for Canadians. That's definitely a leadership principle.
Peter, you brought up the word trust, and right away I thought of standards. What is standards? How do we associate that word with trust? Standards.
So that one's a little tougher. Actually, Craig and I both participate in government bodies to help come up with some of those standards, define those standards. And there's a lot of them that are out there. I would say this, that the Canadian government has very good, well-established standards around the types of data, how those types of data need to be supported. The industry then has follow-on standards on how those are implemented, frankly, more on a global context. And yeah, there are potentially gaps in there when you're trying to connect a government standard to an industry standard. But I do actually have faith that most of the standards that we're building our Canadian IT infrastructure on right now are solid. And so leverage those standards, understand what they are, and make sure that you're able to innovate with those standards in mind. But back to the leadership piece, don't let those become excuses as to why you can't do something, right? Understand what those standards are, make sure you're set up to work with those standards, and then innovate away.
Cool.
Yeah, and what I would add is, I think Canadians have been adept at adopting standards that are best practices from all over the world. And we see that every day. And Peter mentioned that we're both part of groups that are establishing and furthering these standards. And it's wonderful to hear people talk about, well, how do we adopt GDPR considerations to this? And what can we do from a standards perspective? And right now there's great work going on federally. There's great work going on provincially. There's great work going on everywhere, because if we can have the right standards as a country, we can really thrive, not only domestically, but internationally, because that, again, feeds back into trust, because they know that we're transparent, that we're adopting these standards wherever we can, and that it's not our way or the highway, it's which way are we going to travel together to get the most accomplished.
Right. One of the things that we do a lot of in our industry, the information communication technology industry, is use the term use cases. So I'm going to push you fellows a little bit on use cases. Can you share with us some tactical use cases, low-hanging fruit around critical infrastructure and cloud first, or cloud data management with a focus, and how that presents itself as an opportunity to modernize the Canadian public sector, both IT and optimize costs? How's that one?
Yeah, well, I'll give Peter a second to think about it. I'll take a first stab at that. There's a lot of talk about modernization, and there are thousands of applications in all levels of public sector infrastructure around Canada that would benefit from modernization. At the same time, there are some really fundamental things that people need to take into account and build foundations for. So, as in a good example, I think that, as boring as it may sound, there are still lots of organizations that don't have a solid data protection strategy. Mm-hmm. How am I actually protecting my data? How am I centralizing my data? How am I inventorying my data so I know what I really have? Something we call the single source of truth. For me, before I could consider adopting clouds, I would want to have a firm handle on what data I actually have, so I don't end up with data proliferation or data leakage. It's a frightening concept, but that's an issue when you start putting data in multiple places, because what you're really doing is expanding your perimeter that you have to protect, and that's not easy. But if you can spend time making sure you actually know what your data is and know where to find it and know how to manage it through its entire life cycle, that to me is a great example of getting it right before you started doing exercising a multi-cloud strategy or a single cloud strategy. Because the rush to put data out somewhere, I was talking to a customer 2 weeks ago who has 200 or 300 terabytes in a public cloud, and it was going to cost them $25,000 to bring it back. Yeah. Just because of egress fee, because they didn't consider it, because they rushed in. Well, there's an opportunity to do it right. And I think data management is the low-hanging fruit, in my opinion. And that sets you up for an awesome modernization strategy where you move from traditional VMs to containers. And I'm sure Peter has some opinions around that. But I think that you got to make sure your data strategy is clear first.
Peter, if memory serves me right, by the way, VMware has done a lot in transforming social services in this country, particularly at the provincial level, but it's all public sector. Maybe you could talk to us a little bit about that from the perspective of a use case.
Sure, happy to. And just to, I guess, lay a little bit of technical foundation, everything I'm talking about is based on what we call the VMware cloud. So everything Craig talked about, from you being able to do disaster recovery on your data, to use containers, modern applications with Kubernetes, existing applications that are on virtual machines, all of that just lives in virtual cloud, or VMware cloud. And that is what ThinkOn is leveraging to build this sovereign cloud that we have. And so I'll give you some examples. The one you mentioned, Wayne, social services. So we are leveraging the modern application platform of VMware to completely digitize social services delivered in one of the provinces here in Canada. And it's back to the example I talked about earlier, right? If your requirements change today, you need to be able to change the system tomorrow. And so that is true in a lot of the social services that we're delivering. Specifically in this province, it's to deliver them efficiently, but to be able to react quickly to those changes as well. So that's one example where we are focused on not only the platform for modern applications, but training the teams in that government how to think like modern application developers, and then helping them to assess of the potentially not so modern applications that you have, which are the ones you want to work on refactoring first. Which ones are going to have the biggest bang for your buck and have the most impact on your citizens? That's something we're doing actively right now with more than one provincial government, but one is kind of all in on that. If that's an interesting use case, not my place to share names on this live webinar, but I can potentially make peer-to-peer connections if that's interesting for anyone else that's on the call today.
So, this whole move to cloud and overlaying this dramatic pandemic we've been all going through, I think of the words business continuity and back to work, and how are we dealing with this, transition to more remote, but how are we going to handle business continuity now and back to work, gentlemen?
I'll jump on that one first. So this has been an area of strength for us in the last year and going forward. It's another area where I'm proud to be a Canadian, and I'm proud to be working at a company that has helped Canada over the last year. So business continuity, there's a lot of things that are built into that. The one that is top of mind for most Canadian organizations right now is work from anywhere. And I would say that almost everyone in Canada, public sector and private sector, has gotten to the level of work from anywhere that has allowed us to continue as an economy. Right. However, I would also suggest that we as technologists were forced to do that under duress. The larger we. And so while it's working, I would suggest that people on this call probably understand that it's held together by duct tape in some areas. And so as we move forward, we need to figure out, okay, pat ourselves on the back for doing a great job for Canada, and then say, but work from anywhere is different going forward. It needs to be secure. There needs to be no duct tape. It needs to be allow people to work from their Government of Canada office, work from the OCC Transpo train that they're on, work from home some days, get out and meet with some of the public-private partnership groups that they have, and have access to everything that they need to do. And that's the next phase that I'm seeing in Canada, regardless of private or public sector. Craig?
Yeah, so I think that duct tape situation that you mentioned, Peter, is actually very apropos. And what we're seeing at different levels of public sector, primarily in the municipal space, is a massive increase in ransomware, not only attacks, but success. So we had been working on a service enhancement prior to the COVID situation hitting us. And what we've noticed was a massive spike in the frequency of customers looking for help, looking for a way to recover from what was clearly a terrible situation. They sent people home to work, people at home reading emails, not behind a firewall. Next thing you know, things start to get a little crazy. And they have VPN connections. And next thing, the malware gets to travel through the VPN connections. But the bottom line was a lot more data has been put at risk in the last 13 to 14 months than any of us probably care to enumerate. So it's really imperative that people go back and revisit that duct tape, but it's also imperative that people know there's technology that can mitigate ransomware and other bad actors like that does not need to be complex. And it's not duct tape, but it's another way to extend the the curve, if you will, on how to stay ahead of the bad actors, because that's just another form of a disaster to me. And business continuity, I mean, we've all read the horror stories. We have to help organizations, especially in the public sector, because it's so critical to all of us that things, government can continue to run, and healthcare, and all other aspects of public sector. So I think that's a very important issue to consider too.
One of the trends that's going on right now is when narratives in Canada is repatriation of supply chains in a number of our sectors, right? And when I look at that as a potential impact on the ICT sector in Canada, are we seeing very soon or right now the establishment of a sovereign Canadian cloud?
Maybe I'll start with that one. So, I think that the way I look at it is public sector is one of the key vehicles to driving innovation in the domestic innovation economy. So there's a multitude of technology developers who are Canadian based who want to thrive domestically and globally. And it's a great way to foster that innovation. I look at the work that we do across all levels of government. And what I love about it more than anything else is it's a testament to being able to prove you can do something as a home team in your home market, from which you can expand and thrive and deliver those services. So from a supply chain perspective, I would encourage people to look at things that are part of the home team. Like if there's service providers that do things that can be cloud enabled, that's a really important thing. Like that's something that everyone needs to consider, because ultimately what you do is you drive innovation, and which is more than just employment. And I think that the public sector has to think this way. Innovation is more than employment.
Peter, I'm going to give you 15 seconds on that one. I got to get to some of the Q&A questions that are coming through. So give me 15 seconds of brilliance.
It sounds great. That's a lot of pressure. Now I'm 10. So I will say, back up to where we talked about earlier, standards and trust are important. There are lots of cloud options out there. Make sure that they connect with the standards and the trust that you are looking to bring to your constituents and service Canadians. Frankly, I've been working with ThinkOn for years, and I'm a big fan of what ThinkOn brings into this space.
So here's a question, gentlemen. I'm going to read it. I have to. It just came in. Commercial businesses have been ahead in the game for cloud and SaaS procurement via e-commerce storefronts. What are some of the essential things you would recommend for a public sector marketplace?
Quickly from my perspective, it's about enabling technologies. So what Peter talked about earlier from a supply chain perspective, and what I was mentioning earlier from getting some of the basics right. You need to be able to protect data, you need to be able to locate data, find data, save data. And then you can get into some more interesting aspects of how do we actually change the business. And there are lots of great SaaS applications out there that are poised to become available for public sector consumption that don't require you to compromise on security, which you absolutely cannot and should not do.
Right. Peter?
Yeah, one of the nice things about having a marketplace is that a lot of those things are taken care of for you, right? So timely right now, Apple just did a new release on their App Store. And so it's very clear what is going on in that App Store. The same is true for a marketplace around business and government apps. It can be presented to you in a way that you understand, what does this comply with? What are the risks that I need to be aware of? And takes care a lot of that work for you that otherwise may have been a huge investigation. Then that helps us get to our end goal, which is innovate more quickly. And a marketplace can give you that confidence that these things have already been looked at, and the implications around privacy and security are presented right up front for you.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. We're at the end of our time for this 30-minute segment. I want to say to everyone, the listeners, we're tracking your questions, and we're going to get back to you with answers to those questions in the not so distant future. I wanted to take this opportunity to thank both Craig and Peter for illuminating a lot of what we're looking forward to in terms of cloud first and the Canadian public sector. And I want to thank all the people that joined today for this 30-minute segment to learn more about what's going on in that particular area. On that
Wayne,
note,
you've been a
thank you
great
very much.
host. Thank you.
Thank you very
you,
much,
Wayne.
everybody. Thanks. Bye.
Take care. Stay safe.